signs of time blindness and how it exhibits for dyslexics specifically. And the way I like to think of it is I've got kind of three buckets. There's time when it's missing, the stress that's caused by missing or time essentially, and then just in general forgetting things when it comes to time. So missing time is going to be things like getting nothing done all day. This idea that it is 6 p.m. in the evening and or 8 p.m. in the evening, and you go, I did absolutely nothing all day. That's not true. You did a ton during the day, even if you rested, because resting is doing something. That time, though, the time blindness in that situation is that you're not able to see from 8 a.m. till 9 p.m. It's not clear in your mind the chunks of time that have passed. So your brain literally goes from it was 7 a.m. and now it's 7 p.m. and nothing triggers, nothing remembers. So you are literally missing everything that happens in between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. That's your missing time. Another one is, and this is really common with people who have ADHD and suffer with hyperfixation and inability to regulate attention, is looking up when you're at work and you're like, oh my God, it's noon already. Oh my gosh, it's 6 p.m. When we get into that hyper focus, like that video I showed earlier, that's kind of how I see it specifically, time blindness, is we don't see the literal passage of time. Again, it's a concept, not a literal thing. So as we move through the day and you're hyper focused, you're not going, oh, it's been an hour, it's been 2 hours, it's been 3 hours. Those chunks of time are just gone. Another is forgetting when things happen. This is pretty common for dyslexics because we think in pictures essentially. So time is not an image. So to be like, oh, when did we go to, my boyfriend asked me this the other day. He was like, when did we go to Fuga de Chao, which is a really nice like Brazilian steakhouse? And I was like, oh, I don't know. In my mind though, because dyslexic strength, I can see what I wore to Fuga de Chao. I can see the front of the restaurant. I can see the valet. I can see the table setting. I can see my caipirinha, but I can't remember what day it happened. Again, just pausing for a second, dyslexic strength here. I can figure it out using narrative reasoning and dynamic reasoning. So I can sit down and go like, oh, well, we went with Harper, his stepdaughter, so it was on a Friday, and I can work through that. But the idea is we can't just instantly know, oh, that happened 2 weeks ago. Oh, that happened Christmas when I was 8. We have to take the pieces and find where it sits within the timeline that we mentally create for ourselves, because one is a visual and one is not. So time blindness is essentially like running into a dark hole and you just have no idea where things are. And then turning things in late. This happens to all of us. Time just disappears. We forget things and it's just gone. We forget to turn things in. Stress and time. So this one is more of a feeling rather than a literal time struggle. So this is going to be things like when your friends ask you to plan something and you instantly get that spike of stress of like putting all the pieces together, figuring out the timeline, trying to make it work for everybody. That is such a stressful thing for people who struggle with time blindness, because we can't necessarily, unless we have tools, figure out how to make everything work. We're great at puzzles, but not when the puzzles are theoretical, right? Like I can do a physical puzzle, but a brain puzzle I can't necessarily do. Another big stressor when it comes to time is being on time, like literally being on time. This is not one I suffer from because I overcompensate, much like organizing. I worked really, really hard to build the systems so that I'm never late and I'm always on time, if not early. But there are times in my life when I am late and it causes me so much stress and anxiety, and I feel the need to apologize. And then we'll get into a little bit more about the effects of that in another slide. Not knowing how long things take. This is a huge problem for a lot of us. It affects us every day. It affects you at work. It affects you at home. It affects you when you're driving. Let me give you an example. My partner is a fantastic neurotypical human being. He is brilliant. He's a planner. And every morning we both work from home. So he'll come out and we'll be like, chit chatting about our day. I'd be like, oh, I need to do X, Y, and Z. And he'll be like, oh, well, I'd like to go have a lunch. Can you make that work? You think like 12, 1, and I'll have no idea. Because I'll be like, well, I need to get these 6 things done. And he'll be like, well, how long will they take? And I genuinely have no idea. I have no clue how long it was going to take me to make this presentation. And it is so frustrating on the flip side with him trying to plan and me being like, I don't know, I'll be done when I'm done.
I also
So
don't
that
think
caused,
you've ever said to me something will take you longer than an hour. Like the amount of times you'll be like, that'll take me an hour. And I think, really? An hour? That's very, no, no, definitely an hour. And I'm thinking, I can't possibly be an hour of work. It's not possible. Like you are a superhuman, but not to that degree. And you're like, no, 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 it'll take me an hour. And then I'm like, how long did it take you? And you're like, not an hour. How long? I don't know.
yeah. Yeah. And we're going to talk about that more in a minute as to how you can combat that. But yeah, no, my answer is a standard hour. Any activity takes an hour for me, whether it's cleaning the kitchen, which honestly takes 15 minutes, it still takes an hour in my mind. So, constantly feeling behind on work is another big stressor, even if we're not necessarily behind on work, because we can't see how long tasks will take, we always feel behind the ball. Natalie and I were having this conversation last week because Natalie was feeling stressed and she's like, I'm always behind and I only feel okay when I'm ahead. And in all honesty, we will always feel behind because we have no frame of reference as to how much we actually have to do. Yes, there's the to-do list, but that to-do list, every item on there could be 5 minutes or it could be 5 hours. And it's time blindness causes that extra stress and that feeling of constantly like, well, I guess I'll just stay up late. I guess I'll just, we can't measure how much we have ahead of us. Um, and that causes a lot of stress, friction, and it's just awful at work. And then lastly, when we get to like forgetting time, this is going to be those moments where you forget how long it takes to travel somewhere. So I live out in the middle of literal nowhere. It's not actually nowhere. I live in the suburbs. And to get into the city, it takes probably about 30 minutes for most things. So it's that idea of like, you have to plan. And sometimes I don't necessarily plan. I just get up and I'm like, well, I'm going downtown. I'll be there in a bit. So forgetting to factor in travel time. This is true for meetings. This is true for building in like break time. Sometimes we just forget to factor it in. Um, Underestimating and overestimating prep time. This is another one. I just forget that I have to get ready sometimes, or I have a wrong like amount of time in my head. So I'm like, I can get ready in 15 minutes. That is not true. It is never true and it will never be true. It is that idea that you forget to factor it in when building out a plan. And then paying bills. I forget to do this all the time. It is, unless it's on like auto pay, time blindness like sneaks in and it doesn't exist. Again, it's that like word recall, it's that time blindness, it's all those little executive function issues that we consistently struggle with. And then the last is missing appointments. I forget appointments all the time, and it is crippling when I do. I just like get this feeling inside. I'm like, oh, I did it again. I forgot.